Good morning. I don't see you, but it's great to be here anyway again. And by way of introduction to this class, in the late 1800s, contemporary science actually warned against women and education in the belief that women were too frail to handle the stress. As Dr. and Harvard professor Edward Clark wrote in his 1873 book, Sex and Education, he said, "A woman's body can only handle a limited number of developmental tasks at one time. Girls who spend too much energy developing their minds during puberty will end up with undeveloped or with diseased reproductive systems." Well, thankfully, we've been able to overcome that thinking for the most part. And my goal in this class is to present women scientists to you that have been forgotten or unknown or who haven't been duly recognized at all. And there are so many women who fall into this category that I think I could teach this class for months. But I've chosen the women scientists that I found especially interesting, and I will be using lectures, slides, and video to teach this class, and hopefully I'm going to have input from all of you. So today, I'm going to start with the ancient women who paved the way for modern women scientists. A famous story from Greece relates how a young woman named Agnodice wished to become a doctor in Athens, but found that this was forbidden. In fact, a woman practicing medicine in Athens in the 4th century BC faced the death penalty. Refusing to give up on her dreams, Agnodice traveled to Alexandria, where women were routinely allowed in the medical profession. Once she had received her training, she returned to Athens to practice, but she did so disguised as a man. When she was found to be a woman, pretending to be a doctor, she was brought to trial and charged with a capital crime until she was saved by her female patients who stormed the proceedings and shamed the prosecuting males into releasing her. Following Agnodice's trial, the laws were changed in Athens so women could now practice medicine. But by this time, female physicians were known in Egypt for centuries. In Egypt, women could own land, initiate divorce, own businesses, and become priestesses and scribes. Doctors were all scribes, one of the most respected and affluent of the social classes, although not all scribes became doctors. 4,700 years ago, around 2700 BC, when the pharaohs began to build pyramids, Merit Pa was the royal court's chief physician. Merit Pa is the first female doctor known by name in world history. She is not only the first female doctor known by name, but the first woman ever mentioned in the study of science. Her inscription, left by her son, a high priest, was found on a tomb at Saqqara, the Valley of the Kings, naming her chief physician, a position which would have made her a teacher and a supervisor of males. It is said that she encouraged people to wash their plates and their hands after every meal, especially other physicians. And this wasn't encouraged again until 1846 by Dr. Joseph Lister. Another famous early female physician is Pesachet. Pesachet is referred to in inscriptions as the king's associate, which suggests that she was the personal physician of the monarch. She is also associated with the training of midwives, one of the few references to such training in Egyptian history. All of the information comes to us about Pesachet from her stela or her gravestone at Giza. And though this is scant, it does establish Pesachet as a medical practitioner, and it also makes clear that there were other female physicians practicing at the same time whom she supervised or trained. During Pesachet's time, there was a medical school at Sais, which educated female students in gynecology and obstetrics. It was believed that this is where she studied and taught medicine, although it is not known just how far her medical training progressed. And this is a slide of the medical school at Sais. These are from the ruins. Egyptian women had to double as scribes and scholars just to study medicine. Sometimes women apprenticed themselves to doctors to learn, or they studied and taught obstetrics and other specialties at the school at Sais. Pesachet was given the title of Lady of the Female Physicians. This title is important because it shows that not only were a number of women working as doctors, but that they were also administrative and supervised as a woman as well. Egyptian medicine was a unique mixture of herbs and treatments, a few surgical procedures, therapy from dreams, and just plain magic. They were able to treat many diseases and injuries much more successfully than doctors could thousands of years later. They showed a need for cleanliness and a knowledge of anatomy and physiology that was very sophisticated for the time, and they still believed in the need for divine blessings and magic charms. Next, I want to talk about Hypatia. Hypatia can be considered the world's first martyr to mathematics. She was the first recorded female mathematician. She was born around 350 AD, and she's often called Hypatia of Alexandria. She was a Greek mathematician, astronomer, inventor, and a philosopher in Egypt, which was then part of the Eastern Roman Empire. She was the head of the Neoplatonic school at Alexandria, where she taught philosophy and astronomy. Her father, Theon of Alexandria, taught at the museum in Alexandria. Besides its 2 libraries with 500,000 book scrolls, the museum had laboratories and facilities for teaching and research, where scholars lived at public expense in a park-like setting. Hypatia, even when she was young, was a brilliant student in philosophy, religion, math, poetry, and the arts. As a teenager, she traveled to Athens to complete her higher education at the Neoplatonist Academy with Plutarch, whose daughter, Assaplagenia, also studied there. Well, word got around about this intense and brilliant young woman. By the time Hypatia returned home, a celebrity of sorts, the museum had a job waiting for her. Her talent at teaching geometry, astronomy, philosophy, and math drew admiring students from around the Roman Empire, pagan and Christian alike. She also wrote commentaries on quadratic equations, on conic sections, and she loved to tinker with hydrometers and other devices that made research a lot easier. Hypatia became a woman of influence in intellectual and political circles. She mingled easily with philosophers, with students, with magistrates, and with royalty. But the only bad luck that she had was her timing. She lived on the cusp of momentous change. Well, before her birth, Christianity had been made official, and in AD 390, it became compulsory. Hypatia was not a Christian. Bishop Cyril, the religious head of Alexandria, set out to destroy pagans and the monuments. To enforce this, he used a band of Egyptian monks who were something like the Hells Angels, whose anger was racial as well as religious. In 391, they destroyed the Serapeum, the temple that housed one of the museum's libraries, and gradually Hypatia moved to the top of their enemies list. Bishop Cyril did not believe that Hypatia should be allowed to pursue her study. The bishop ordered a mob of monks to kidnap Hypatia. They first dragged her off her chariot, and then they proceeded to drag her through the streets as they tortured her. The monks burned Hypatia and scraped her skin off with oyster shells. They took her to a church where they stripped her naked, beat her with tiles, and tore her limbs from her body. As a Neoplatonist, Hypatia believed that we live in an imperfect copy of the ideal world. She believed in the presence of evil, but not in its eternal existence, a belief that was tested by her horrible death. Throughout her life, Hypatia had many suitors intent on love and marriage, but she always answered them the same way. She said, "As a philosopher, I am wedded to the truth." So here are some interesting quotes from her, which are pretty amazing when you think of the times. So I'm going to try to show you a video. Ah, there you all are. I see you now. Great to see you. Let's just 1 minute. All right. Okay, can you see this? Valerie, can people
In the
see
city of
this?
Alexandria in 415 CE, the bishop and the governor were in a fight. It started with a disagreement over the behavior of a militia of monks and ended with an accusation of witchcraft leveled against one of the most...
Are people able to see that? Yes. Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Yes, we all see.
The details of her life have been the subject of much dispute and have taken on an almost mythical status. But while none of Hypatia's own writings survive, her contemporaries and students' accounts of her work and life paint a picture of the qualities that made her renowned as a scholar, beloved as a teacher, and ultimately led to her downfall. Hypatia was born around 355 in Alexandria, then part of the Egyptian province of the Eastern Roman Empire, and an intellectual center. Her father, Theon, was an accomplished Greek mathematician and astronomer. Her mother is unknown. Hypatia was likely an only child, and Theon educated her himself. By adulthood, she had surpassed her father in both mathematics and philosophy, becoming the city's foremost scholar and taking over his position at the head of the Platonic school, similar to a modern university. She refined scientific instruments, wrote math textbooks, and developed a more efficient method of long division. But perhaps her most significant contributions to intellectual life in Alexandria came through her teaching. The philosophy Hypatia taught drew from the legacy of Plato and Aristotle, as well as the mystical philosopher Plotinus and the mathematician Pythagoras. The convergence of these influences merged to form a school called Neoplatonism. For the Neoplatonists, mathematics had a spiritual aspect, divided among the four branches of arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. These subjects were not studied merely for the sake of curiosity or practical utility, but because they authenticated the belief that numbers were the sacred language of the universe. In the repeated patterns of algebraic formulas and geometric shapes, the orbits of the planets, and the harmonious intervals of musical tones, the Neoplatonists saw a rational cosmic force at work. Students delved into this ordered mathematical world to achieve higher unity with this force, known as the One. While Hypatia was considered pagan, a term for traditional Roman belief before Christianity, she worshipped no particular deity or deities, and her ideas could be applied alongside multiple religious viewpoints. Jewish and Christian, as well as pagan students, traveled from the farthest reaches of the empire to study with her. The nonpartisan environment Hypatia fostered, where all students could feel comfortable, was especially remarkable given the religious and political turmoil that was fracturing the city of Alexandria at the time. Christianity had recently become the empire's state religion. The local Archbishop Cyril had steadily gained political power, commanding zealous militias of Christian monks to destroy pagan temples and harass the Jewish population. In doing so, he encroached on the secular authority of the Roman governor Orestes, himself a moderate Christian, leading to a bitter public feud between the two men. Because she was seen as a wise and impartial figure, Governor Orestes consulted Hypatia, who advised him to act with fairness and restraint. But when a group of Cyril's monks incited a riot, badly injuring Orestes in the process, he had their leader tortured to death. Cyril and his followers blamed Hypatia, accusing her of witchcraft to turn Orestes against Christianity. In March 415, as Hypatia was traveling through the city, the bishop's militia of monks dragged her from her carriage and brutally murdered and dismembered her. Hypatia's death was a turning point in the politics of Alexandria. In the wake of her murder, other philosophers in the Greek and Roman tradition fled, and the city's role as a center of learning declined. In a very real way, the spirit of inquisition, openness, and fairness she fostered died with her. For another harrowing tale of the demise of a powerful woman, watch our video.
Okay, that was Hypatia. Pretty sad ending to a brilliant life. So the last woman I want to talk about today, scientist who really influenced, is Maria the Jewess, and she was an inventor of alchemy. The great chemist Maria the Jewess has been pretty well lost in the blur of ancient history. Most of us, I'm sure, haven't heard of her. Scholars speculate on her origin. She is called the Jewess because the Egyptian alchemist Zosimos, who wrote in the late days of the Roman Empire, 500 years after Maria lived, called her a sister of Moses. Well, that could have been just no more than a way of saying she was wise. We don't know. He called her a sage. She could have been a Greek working in Egypt or even a Syrian. We know she lived in Egypt sometime around the 1st century. Most of what we do know about her comes from Zosimos. Among other things, Zosimos talks about her invention of the keratoconus. The keratoconus. This was an airtight device that was used to heat substances and collect the vapors, a hermetic arts practice that is the origin of the phrase hermetically sealed, and the bain marie, a gentle heat water bath named after her and which is still in use today. And today we call it the double boiler. Her invention, which perfected distillation, was thought to be a key stage in the process of changing base metals into gold. Her apparatus is still used in modern chemistry labs, although no one has yet changed copper to gold. She also invented the tripikos, tripekos, a 3-armed pot still used to purify substances through distillation. But actually, Maria was closer in her thinking to Egyptian process engineers than she was to the alchemists who were trying to change metals into gold. She was much more interested in the practical uses of chemistry. As the scientific revolution progressed from alchemy to chemistry, her distillation methods, copper tubes and glassware, were used for purposes that had nothing to do with gold, like making chocolate or making whiskey. So Maria gave us far more than the double boiler. Significant although that is, she founded an important school of chemistry in Alexandria. The French word bain marie is the only place we still hear her name today. That and the French slang term, femme au bain marie, which means an empty-headed pretty woman, a woman with a double boiler for a head. Now there's a sorry reminder of how much we've forgotten about who Maria the Jewess really is and what she accomplished. She's credited for several cryptic sayings, such as, just as a man is composed of 4 elements, likewise is copper. And just as a man results from the association of liquids, of solids, and of the spirit, so does copper. And join the male and the female, and you'll find what is sought. But her most famous saying is the axiom of Maria. And this is the axiom of Maria. And there's different ways to say this, but 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 3, and out of the 3rd comes the 1 as the 4th. So perhaps her search for the recipe of gold was really the search for something more personal. The psychologist Carl Jung saw this axiom as a metaphor for the process of individuation. So he said, from the many to the one, from the undifferentiated consciousness to individual consciousness. And that's how he saw it. So next week, we'll go into the 1800s and start with Ellen Swallow Richards. So I appreciate you all coming today. I'm sorry about problems with all the the Zoom, but we'll work it out. So what I'd like to do now is unmute you and hear what you have to say.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Let me see how I can. How do I get rid of the mute? Go to participant. Unmute all. Okay, I've got you all unmuted. So if anybody has comments, I'd love to hear them.
Very interesting.
Yes.
Yes, I like the Hypatia. And
Yeah.
yes, and I like to, if you can send us a copy of the quotes that she did about her reasoning, that would be really nice. because
Okay.
That was very
Amazing woman for the times, wasn't she?
unbelievable.
Was.
Yeah.
Yes, for that.
Yeah.
Love your library wall.
Oh,
Yeah. Very interesting.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
And
great.
now you have my email address. Please email me with your questions, your thoughts. And if you have a scientist that you especially want me to talk about, I'm also happy to do that. But I do have a lot of them coming. So I hope I guess I'll be back in 2 weeks. So I hope to see you all then. And like I
Yes.
said, once again,
Thank you so much.
yeah.
to get the Zoom better, it's kind of hard. But
Jill?
thank you for coming.
Hello, Jill. It's Victoria, dear. How are you?
I'm good, Victoria. Good to see you.
I'm so glad. I learned a lot today. I just am mesmerized, really, by what you were teaching. Actually, and I think I know a little bit about women's history, but I'm impressed. I learn from you every single time I have a conversation with you. And,
It's
you know,
amazing. My original quote about women can't learn or they're going to ruin their reproductive rights. And then I'm going to talk about like women in astronomy who weren't even allowed to use the telescope.
Right.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
we have so much to learn about who we are and where we came from, you know, so this is great. I appreciate you so much. And you know what? I don't worry about the whole Zoom challenge because we're all learning this together.
I'll get it.
We're all in it together.
You did great.
It's good to see all these smiling faces I'm looking at you. You can't see me because my camera broke. Ha, ha, ha.
Oh,
You're lucky.
yeah.
I am. I wouldn't want anybody to see me right now.
Push the button in the right-hand
My hair's
corner.
in a ponytail.
You look fine, Victoria. I saw her this morning.
Oh, that's right. I did see you today, didn't I?
Yeah.
That's right.
Maybe it's not your camera. Push the button in the right-hand corner where the dots are.
What do you mean?
Look at the picture and there are 3 dots.
No, my camera is actually broken. IT told me that. So
Oh, okay.
no, it's not fixable.
Still learning buttons.
Yes. But thank you, Jill. You did a great job.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. See you all next
Next year,
time.
thanks
Thanks
for
for
coming
coming.
for a week.
Right.
Bye-bye.